Tonight, a promise of a new network of walk-in GP clinics. The First Minister announces the plan at the SNP conference, saying you won't need an appointment and there'll be flexible opening hours.
That means more people can go after work when it fits with their lives. And to make that even easier, they'll be open 7 days a week.
Also on the programme, a man accused of murdering his girlfriend in a hot tub in Shetland tells a court she repeatedly stabbed herself with a knife. People in Mull take their council to court over the location of a new school.
Coming up in tonight's sport, Scotland move one step closer to qualifying for the World Cup, but frustration overshadows celebration at Hampden Park.
I'm Laura Goodwin and this is Reporting Scotland. A network of walk-in GP services open 7 days a week until 8 p.m. will be set up across Scotland, delivering 1 million more appointments. That's the promise from the First Minister, who gave his speech at the SNP conference in Aberdeen this afternoon. John Swinney said it would beat the 8 a.m. rush. Our political editor Glenn Campbell was watching.
Whether you live in Aberdeen or elsewhere in Scotland, it can be hard to get an on-the-day appointment with a GP.
I always find that when you're getting an appointment for children, it does come quicker. So, but yeah, it's really hard. It's really difficult.
Same day. I don't think it's possible.
You can't just go in and see a doctor usually, unless it's an emergency.
In his SNP conference address, the First Minister set out new plans to tackle what he calls the 8 o'clock rush to secure a consultation with the doctor.
We want to make it easier for people to see a GP where and when it works for them. That's why I can announce today that the SNP government will open a nationwide network of walk-in GP services.
If re-elected, the First Minister wants to set up an initial 15 of these centres, open into the evenings and operating 7 days a week, with a view to expanding this network.
That's the SNP government working for Scotland.
He also has plans to boost the social care workforce by helping overseas staff who have visas to be in the UK get jobs in Scotland.
We will sponsor these skilled staff so they can work, pay tax and help keep Scotland's care homes running. Hundreds of dedicated workers able to start work immediately. Scotland's older people must not pay the price for Westminster's prejudice.
He was positive about immigration and asylum and accused UK politicians, including the Prime Minister, of a race to the right.
Keir Starmer promised to be a left-wing Labour leader, and then he became a right-wing Prime Minister. He stole Jeremy Corbyn's clothes, and now he's dressing up as Nigel Farage.
John Swinney said he was just getting started as First Minister and was seeking to deliver radical change.
And together, let's win Scotland's independence.
Nothing motivates the SNP membership more, however hard the path to another referendum may be.
And Glenn joins us now. Glenn, how hard will it be for John Swinney to bring about another referendum?
Pretty tough, partly because Holyrood has a partly proportional voting system, which is designed to stop any one party dominating in that way. It's also the case that the SNP is not as popular, according to the opinion polls, as it has been in the past. One thing they have in their favour, though, is that unionist opposition is more fragmented than it has been with the rise of Reform UK. So there are certain circumstances in which there might be a pathway to an outright majority, especially if they are successful in persuading back to the SNP some lapsed supporters, and they think that could be possible with the emphasis that John Swinney placed today on the push for independence.
And what difference do you think his plans for walk-in GP services could make?
Well, they want to test out that idea to see if it can have an impact on reducing the pressure on GP surgeries, initially with a network of 15 centres, but with a view to expanding that right across the country into all corners. There's been some reaction from the Royal College of GPs, which says that the critical issue is a shortage of doctors and an unmanageable workload. So that's one of the problems the Scottish Government will have to overcome for this to be successful.
OK, Glenn, many thanks. A man accused of murdering his girlfriend in Shetland has denied the attack, telling a court she stabbed herself. Aaron Pearson said Claire Levesque had been drinking heavily before losing her temper, assaulting him before grabbing a knife and stabbing herself 4 or 5 times. Stephen Godden has this update from Edinburgh High Court.
Claire Levesque pictured with her boyfriend Aaron Pearson. He denies murdering the 24-year-old and today gave evidence in his own defence. Aaron Pearson told the court the couple came to Shetland in October 2023 and lived with his mother in Sannis. Asked by his lawyer if he was abusive towards Claire, he replied yes and no. There were times we drank far too much and we were abusive towards one another. On the day Claire Levesque died, Aaron Pearson told the court she came swinging at him. Furious, he claimed, after she overheard him talking to her dad on the phone about her drinking. Mr Pearson said a struggle ensued, during which Claire Levesque grabbed a knife and then jumped into a hot tub, which he said immediately filled with blood. Then, he told the court, he watched his girlfriend stab herself 4 or 5 times. After that, he said he went into shock and couldn't remember driving his Porsche into the ocean. Asked by his lawyer if he could have attacked Claire Levesque when he returned to the house, he replied, I guess anything could have happened in those moments. I don't remember. Under cross-examination, the prosecutor put it to Aaron Pearson that he inflicted the stab wounds that killed Claire Levesque. Not that I recall, was his reply. You murdered her, the advocate depute then put it to him. I don't have any recollection of doing anything like that, he told the court. Aaron Pearson denies murder and 6 other charges. The trial at the High Court in Edinburgh continues. Stephen Godden, reporting Scotland.
Plans for a Chinese company to invest £1.5 billion to build a wind turbine factory near Inverness have raised concerns in some quarters over the country's influence on the renewable sector. Mingyang Smart Energy has identified Ardersier as a preferred site. It could produce 1,500 jobs locally. Well, Douglas Fraser is in Inverness for us tonight. Douglas, what exactly is being proposed?
Well, this could be a huge boost for this area. Ardersier is just down the coast to the east of Inverness, the coast of the Moray Firth. It's about 350 acres of developed land that used to be used for building of wind, oil and gas platforms. It's now being redeveloped with a very deep berth. About 350 acres is roughly the equivalent of 180 football pitches. And the plan from Mingyang is to use part of that space for a £1.5 billion investment, 1,500 jobs, and that's just the first phase. That would be to build the blades for offshore wind turbines, perhaps onshore, and the nacelles, the gearbox that goes on top of the tower in a wind turbine. Full of technology. These would be very skilled jobs, high value, and would become very important to this regional and the Scottish economy. It would represent indeed a breakthrough in what has been a disappointment so far in attracting manufacturing jobs to match the potential that Scotland has for renewable energy in offshore wind, onshore wind, tidal races, and on some occasions, solar power as well.
But what are the concerns?
Well, you mentioned China, and that is the catch. Both the UK and the Scottish Government no doubt would love to announce that this is going ahead as Mingyang wants it to, but they have to ask, the UK Government has the role of asking, are they willing to let Chinese companies dominate this technology the way that they have done with other technologies, particularly the new one of floating offshore wind turbines? And is there a risk that Chinese technology embedded within the manufacturing process could allow control remotely of these strategically significant assets? Now, the UK has wrestled with this in the steel industry with telecoms already, and it's wrestling still with this without a clear policy about whether it wants to work with China or it's really wary about the risks of doing so.
OK, our business and economy editor Douglas Fraser, many thanks. Campaigners in Mull have taken Argyll and Bute Council to court over its decision to build a new £43 million high school in Tobermory. They wanted the new building to be more centrally located on the island, so pupils living in the south did not have to travel to Oban and stay in hostels during the week. Richard Forbes was at the Court of Session in Edinburgh.
Currently, pupils in the north of Mull go to secondary school in Tobermory, while those in the south go to Oban, meaning they have to stay in a hostel during the week. A new central location would give all pupils the opportunity to have their education on the island. A scoring system was used by officials to compare the different proposed sites. On the 7th of March, a meeting of the full council accepted a recommendation that siting the school in Tobermory was the best option. Today, the Court of Session was asked to consider if this decision was unlawful. The first point was that the scoring system did not take account of the fact that the land for a school in the centre of the island would be given for free. The council's legal team countered that the land came with strings attached and that other landowners were not given the opportunity to enter into similar negotiations. The second point was that the community hadn't been consulted adequately. The council countered that community engagement had been carried out, but that the most popular schooling option was unaffordable. A final point questioned how councillors could have reached a decision without taking a vote. The council's team explained to the court that when there is only one viable recommendation on the table and no alternatives, then there's no need for a vote. The islanders who brought their campaign to court say they're hopeful today will make a difference.
The message that this will give, and we weren't able to do this generations ago when this decision was considered before, is we will be able to say we didn't leave a section of our community out, we didn't let the proposal divide our community, we stood together and we made it about our children, and I think the group and the wider community should be so proud of that.
Lord Cuby will now consider the arguments he's heard today. In due course, we'll find out if he thinks the decision to site the new school in Tobermory was unlawful. Richard Forbes, reporting Scotland.
Tonight's main news again. The First Minister announces a new network of walk-in GP clinics to be created within a year at the SNP conference in Aberdeen.
And still to come in the sport, Rangers compile a new shortlist for the head coach role after Stephen Gerrard says no to a return.
A woman raped by the footballer David Goodwillie has lodged a formal request to bring a private criminal prosecution against him. Rape charges were dropped against the former Scotland player 15 years ago, but in 2017 a civil court found he and another man, David Robertson, were rapists. It could be the first private criminal prosecution in more than 40 years. Well, Hope Webb is here to explain. Hope, how does this work legally?
Well, a private prosecution is when an individual attempts to prosecute rather than the Crown. And legal aid was granted to the complainer Denise Clare back in February. And at the time, the Scottish Government did say that that money could be used towards legal fees with a ceiling of £2,500. Now, we know that the Criminal Bill of Letters, and that's a legal document used in Scotland to allow a private citizen to apply to the High Court for permission to bring a private criminal prosecution, was lodged on Friday, so we do know that. And Thomas Ross KC has agreed to represent Denise Clare, who has waived her anonymity, and he spoke to me earlier today.
She's certainly been incredibly determined, and when she came to me and the rest of the legal team and asked whether there was any legal remedy which hadn't been explored, then this essentially was the only avenue left, and she was very keen to follow it through to its natural conclusions.
I hope this has already been a long legal process for all involved.
Yeah, it really has. And just to remind viewers, Denise Clare claims that David Robertson and David Goodwillie raped her at a flat in Armadale in West Lothian back in January 2021. Later that year, the Crown Office did drop rape charges against the pair because there was insufficient evidence to prosecute them. A civil court, like you mentioned, back in 2017, did rule that footballer Goodwillie and his former teammate raped raped Denise Clare. They were both ordered to pay £100,000 worth of damages. But in a recent podcast which David Goodwillie appeared in, he said he wanted a trial. He said, and I'm going to quote, "I don't want to be known as a rapist. That is why I want to fight and clear my name." He went on to say, in his own words, the truth. He wants the truth to come out. Now, it's important to say before this all goes ahead, 3 judges must now decide to allow this private prosecution.
OK, Hope, many thanks indeed. Now, coming up on the 7, broadcasting legend Cathy MacDonald shares her memories of the Mod at the annual celebration of Gaelic language and culture gets underway this week.
In my young days, you were expected to perform at the Mod from primary school, which I did. I think I was about 8 when I went to my first local Mod in Stornoway. I think today the benefits that people feel are very much that togetherness, you know, that community that brings people together.
All that coming up. But let's get tonight's sport now with Lewis. Scotland, let's discuss.
Exactly. I'm not sure how fans will be feeling today because a lot of them were very disappointed with the performance last night.
Yeah.
But I think the best way to get over that is just to look at the group table at the moment
and
see 10 points on the board.
That's
and
it.
sitting pretty right now.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't have to be pretty on the way, does it? As long as the table's looking good.
That's for sure, Laura. That's right. Thanks very much. Well, hello there. It was a night when Steve Clarke's Scotland side secured a playoff to reach the World Cup and saw the head coach take charge of a record-breaking 72nd game. But instead of celebration, Clarke was left really disappointed, and fans were quick to criticise the performance in the 2-1 win against Belarus, despite the national team navigating a near-perfect campaign so far in terms of results. Chris McLaughlin reports.
For the next hour on the phone-in, brace yourselves. We're talking about football, and in particular we're talking about what happened at Hampden last night.
A nation not quite sure how to feel about its football today.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves in. We've flipped the 2 games. But you won 2 games and the aggregate score was 5-2. So let's rejoice in that.
By our reaction at the end, which is hugely frustrating. Obviously the performance was nowhere near the standard that we need it to be.
There's no reason that's probably against a lesser ranked team. That's the poorest performance we've had here. So like I said, it's a bit of a head scratcher for me.
Despite the mood, second spot is secured and with it a playoff place. But a draw against Greece next month away, followed by victory at home against Denmark, and Scotland are heading across the Atlantic next year.
I think it's only natural that the performances in the last 2 games have been slightly alarming. They've been low-key, they've been pedestrian, they've been a bit laboured. But, you know, as someone said, I think performances are for the circus. I think really it's all about results when it comes to the business of qualifying for a World Cup.
Far from pretty, but 2 games.
So, if it comes down to it and Scotland don't win the group, here is how the playoffs work. 16 teams made up of the 12 runners-up, as well as an additional 4 teams who won their Nations League groups but didn't make it into the top 2 in this qualifying campaign, will then contest a 1-leg semi-final, then a final, with 4 successful teams making their way to the USA, Canada and Mexico. But who could Scotland face, I hear you asking, in these playoffs? Well, this isn't set in stone just yet, but if things stay as they are, here are some of the teams dropping into those playoffs, and there are some big hitters as well. Belgium and Italy, both in the top 10 in world football, as well as teams Scotland fans know all about, like Hungary, of course, who broke Scottish hearts at Euro 2024, and Ukraine, who denied Steve Clarke's side a place at the last World Cup. Now, these teams won't be confirmed until the groups are concluded. Now, to domestic football, and Rangers have compiled a new shortlist containing more than 2 candidates after Steven Gerrard ruled himself out of the running for the vacant head coach's role. Many fans were expecting a return for the former boss, who was in negotiations with the board, but it means it's back to the rumour mill for supporters, with names like Danny Röhl, who left Sheffield Wednesday in the summer, among those linked with the position. High-profile names Graham Potter, Michael Carrick and Gary O'Neill are not among the candidates being considered.
Because it has went so dramatically wrong this season, and because there was so much talk of process and I guess what people would regard as a lot of buzzwords this summer, then that applies more pressure on who comes in next. If it had been Steven Gerrard, I think the context is different, right? Because no one's blaming you really for appointing Steven Gerrard. He's the figurehead at that point. Whoever comes in a head coach capacity, while they will be a figurehead to some degree, I don't think it takes the scrutiny off the CEO, off the sporting director, off those roles in the same way that someone like Steven Gerrard would have, fundamentally just because of who he is and what he did the last time he was in Glasgow.
Now, it was a dramatic weekend in the SWPL as Rangers let a 2-goal lead slip against Hibs, the team that pipped them to the title on the final day last season. Hibs started poorly against Leanne Crichton's Rangers yesterday, who had a 2-goal lead through a Katie Wilkinson double before the Edinburgh side responded. Rosie Livingston got them started before Kathleen McGovern grabbed a equaliser. Then Ailey Adams slammed home following neat play by Tegan Bowie to seal the victory for Hibs there. It moves them third in the table, 5 points behind leaders Glasgow City. Rangers are down in 5th after back-to-back defeats. And Laura, there will be more chat about the vacant Rangers manager's position over on the News at 7 very shortly too.
Looking forward to it, Lewis. Thank you very much indeed. Right, time now to get the weather with Christopher. A lot of people on holiday. Are they getting nice weather this
They're getting
week?
dry weather, not necessarily sunny, but it's always sunny above the cloud there, isn't it?
Yeah.
A temperature inversion here, so a layer of warmer air high up, but keeping that cloud trapped. And if you're underneath the cloud, it was cool. Thanks very much indeed. Good evening to you. Yes, it was rather grey in places today with some mist and murk around. And it's all thanks to high pressure, which is situated overhead. You can just about make out the pressure pattern there with the satellite. And you can see the cloud did break for a lucky few with some sunshine coming through. Perthshire was a decent spot for that through the afternoon. As we go into this evening, it remains dry. There'll be a fair amount of cloud around, particularly around the coast and across the islands, inland too, and some mist and fog forming as well. And temperatures here in towns and cities around 6 to 9 Celsius, where it remains clear in a few spots, perhaps colder than that. To tomorrow, and once again, it is predominantly dry with that high pressure overhead, but for many a rather overcast morning. However, that cloud will thin and break at times as we head through the course of the day and into the afternoon. Now you can see here it looks rather bright through many central and western areas, but take that with a pinch of salt because sometimes in situations like this the weather computer models sort of struggle with exactly working out where the best of the sunshine will be. There will be some sun, but equally fairly cloudy conditions around the coast and across the islands with some mist and murk sticking with us and perhaps even the odd spot of drizzle. Into tomorrow evening and overnight, once again, a few spots of drizzle towards the far north and the Northern Isles, but many areas dry. That high pressure sticking with us on Wednesday, keeping weather fronts and rain at bay way out in the Atlantic. So it's another dry day. Once again, there will be some mist and low cloud, some fog. That could linger in places through the day and some sunshine developing. At this stage, we think probably through parts of the Highlands in towards Grampian, best set for that brighter weather. And then you can see as we go into the end of the week, that high pressure still holding on, but weather fronts trying to arrive. And we think probably into the weekend, we'll start to see a return to some wet weather. Before then, though, largely dry, but often cloudy. And there will be some sunshine at times for some. That's the forecast for now. Laura.
Not too bad. You can get a walk in that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, tonight's main news again. The First Minister announces a new network of walk-in GP clinics within a year at the SNP conference in Aberdeen. A man accused of murdering his girlfriend in a hot tub in Shetland tells a court she repeatedly stabbed herself with a knife. And a woman raped by footballer David Goodwillie has lodged a formal request to bring a private criminal prosecution against him. Where we leave you. Christopher and I will be here with your late news at around 10:30. But until then, from everyone on the team, do enjoy the rest of your evening, whatever you're doing, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. Bye-bye.